All right, guys, so moving on to electric flux. I know you've heard the term flux somewhere. I mean, I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but I don't know, that flux capacitor in some sci-fi movie or something like that, but I know you've heard it somewhere, okay? So just hear me out before you get all confused and everything. Electric flux is something that sounds and looks, a bit complicated. Yet, now that we understand electric fields and lines, it actually becomes pretty simple, okay? We're going to calculate how much electric field is flowing through a certain area or flowing through something, all right? Let me go ahead and explain my little drawing over here. Let's say, for example, we're pouring some coffee, which is these little brown arrows, okay? We're pouring that coffee through a filter, okay, which is this square right here. The coffee is going at 5 meters per second. Okay, let me go ahead and write that down. 5 meters per second, okay? The filter is 1 meter squared, okay? So if I were to ask you how much coffee is flowing through the filter per second, that is the flux of the coffee, okay? And that is actually represented by phi, which is that symbol right there without the little squiggly at the end. There we go. That's phi, okay? Which is actually what we want to calculate. With this, we can calculate how much coffee passes through the filter, and with that, you calculate the flux of the coffee, okay? Now, this would be calculated by the velocity of the coffee and the area of the filter, essentially creating the formula velocity times area, okay? And that can be translated directly into electric flux, basically by changing velocity of coffee, into the strength of the electricity or the electric field and multiplying it by the area. And that would be the formula, phi E. So we have, I'm going to write that down in another color. We have phi, okay, E, which is electric field strength. Okay, I'm just going to, E equals electric field strength, okay? So phi E is equal to, okay, E, which once again is the electric field strength, times the area, and the units would be newtons, okay, over coulomb, meter squared, okay? So yeah, that's basically the very general standard definition of electric flux, okay? So if you were to go ahead and going back to the coffee analogy, imagine you're pouring coffee through your filter. Okay, it's Saturday morning, you just woke up and you poured it for exactly 1 second. Okay? So that would mean that the filter this filter right here, some coffee would go on and pass through it. Okay? So imagine that the coffee just goes right on ahead and passes through it, okay? All of this and all of this, okay? So if you were to hold that for 1 second, how much coffee would go through it? Well, you would be able to say that precisely because of this that we have right here, 5 meters per second, well, that would mean that 5 meters of coffee went through, okay? And because of the 1 meter squared, well, that would mean that there would be 5 meters of coffee going through, and because of the area, it would be 5 meters cubed, because we're talking about volume, okay? Because we have meters, and that multiplies, okay? This meters and this meters, okay? So that would be 5 meters cubed, or 5 meters cubed per second, okay? So that would be how much coffee is going through the filter per second, okay? And well, the same applies to the electric field or the electric flux when we're trying to see how much goes through the filter in this case, we use the same type of principle here with the E, which is electric field strength. And with the area, well, that's just the area of the certain space that we're talking about, okay? Now, what would happen if the coffee filter were to get rotated and the coffee is now falling through the filter at an angle? So let me go ahead and draw that out so you guys understand what I'm trying to say, okay? I'm gonna erase the filter too. So imagine that, you know, the coffee is just as we had, like that, okay? But what would happen if the square suddenly gets rotated? So instead of the previous square that we had, something like that, what would happen if now our square is like this? You know, I'm not an art kind of guy, you know, but you guys kind of get the idea. So what would happen, oops, my bad, to the coffee now going this way? Okay, imagine you have some more coffee over here, you know. Would you say that there is the same amount of coffee going through? Or would you say otherwise? Think about that for just 1 second. Okay, so if the coffee, you know, if the filter was going in a crooked kind of way, or kind of like in a diagonal, okay, or if it were to be rotated, the filter, you know, has the same area and the coffee has the same velocity. But now maybe not all of the filter is being, or not the same amount of coffee is going through, okay? Let me draw it in a way that maybe it's easier to imagine. You know, you have your lines over here. Okay. So, you know, the filter was previously like this, you know, coffee was going through it. And if the filter were to be like this, okay, the same amount of coffee wouldn't be going through, okay? And that would mean because of the rotation of the filter, well, it's different, but the filter is the same, the velocity is the same. So how can you calculate now the amount of coffee going through the filter? Well, the way in which this works is basically, let me see if you're able to agree with me. You have here the new height, and you have here the bottom of the filter. Now, would you agree that this is the area in which the coffee flows through? That would be correct, right? So now that we have this, we have an imaginary new coffee filter that has the new height of the previous coffee filter, but the one that is rotated now, okay? So that would be the way in which you would be able to calculate if the electric field is not necessarily going in a uniform and straight way. Well, that's one way in which you are able to do this. And if it's rotated even more, you can still do the same thing. Imagine it's rotated like this. You're still able to use the new height and create a new filter per se, okay? Now, this can be done no matter what inclination. And well, if it's completely parallel, so imagine that the filter is like this, well, then the flux would be 0, okay? And listen to this. How about another hypothetical? We've been assuming that the coffee flow is going perfectly through the coffee filter, okay? You know, just like this is drawn, you know, quote unquote, perfectly straight lines. And I'm not the best artist once again, but it's going through, you know, perfectly straight, everything is fine, uniform. We love that, okay? But let's say, what if the flow of coffee was all over the place? Like, let me go ahead and erase this. Okay, imagine we have our filter right here. Okay, I'm actually gonna draw it just a little bit bigger. Imagine we have our filter right there, okay? That's our coffee filter. And now, what would happen if the coffee, instead of going like that, which is what we were working with, what if I went like that? Or it went like that? What would happen then? It's not going uniformly through the filter. We're having a little bit of trouble with it. It's going in random directions, okay? So the way in which this is actually done is you divide the flow into tiny spaces that are easy to calculate in a uniform way, okay? So this is done using integrals, all right? And that tiny piece that we're going to work with is called dA. So imagine that we have here, this is the space in which the electric flux is coming out of. This is the surface, okay? So we grab a tiny little piece, which is, this is way bigger than it would actually be. It's infinitesimally tiny. But we grab a tiny little piece, okay? And that we're going to call dA. Okay? So this has an electric field strength of E. So now to be able to calculate the flux in this tiny little square, we use the same formula that we previously used, okay? So that tiny area is the electric field at that point times the small area of the square, okay? So once again, we have here the electric field strength and the tiny area of the square, okay? Once you have that, you add all of the pieces of the total area, which is an infinite summation, so basically an integral. And this turns the formula into the integral of E times dA. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and write that formula down. So we have the integral of E times dA. Okay? And that would be the formula for the electric flux. That's more of the general formula, okay? So this formula that we have down over here, this is more of a specific formula in which everything is perfect. The flow or the electric field is going in a perfectly uniform manner. But in reality, the majority of the times it's not like that. So that's why we use the general formula that we have over here. And the way in which this works, just in case you didn't get it completely clear, is that this tiny square that we call dA, okay, this is one infinitesimally small section of the electric field that we're trying to calculate, okay? And the way in which it works is it keeps on adding this integral, this symbol right here. It keeps adding every single dA until all of them are added, okay? And then that multiplies by the electric field strength, and then that gives you the total electric flux, or once again, how much electric field is going through a certain area, okay? And okay, that's basically it. Just in case, I'm going to go ahead and write that down, because it's a pretty simple definition for a normally complex topic. So electric flux, I'm just going to write it down as EF is equal to how much electric field, okay, electric field is going through a certain area. Okay, so once again, this is a very simple definition of a somewhat complex topic, but I hope this explanation really helped. And yeah, please leave a comment with any questions or feedback you might have so that I can make, better videos and everything. And yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Please like the video and subscribe to our channel to support us and help us grow.